Well, thank you for staying with us as we get into our big stories for the day. Of course, we're going to be talking about the e-levy, anticipating it 48 hours to roll out day. But will it actually roll out? If you look at the latest statement from the GRA, so many things to digest. We'll also be talking later on about the constituency elections in the NPP. And we're going to tease out some important bits as well when it comes to, the SOEs and some of the recent things we've heard from the likes of Joseph Kujo, the sector minister, and again, Professor Stephen Ade. We'll be engaging Professor Ransford Jampo on that shortly. But joining us for the conversation on the e-levy and more, we have Dr. Theo Echampong, economist. We also have Dr. John Kuma, Deputy Finance Minister, joining the conversation. Dr. Echampong, a very good morning to you. Thank you for joining. I believe you may either have to unmute or maybe there's a challenge with the sound.
It should be okay now, I believe.
Right. I can hear you now. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, we'll be talking about the e-levy and extensively, but something that piques my interest that I'd like to run by you. I'm sure you followed what has been happening in recent days and weeks as far as SOEs are concerned. The latest report on the back of the performances of the SOEs. And some people have even hinted or intimated that if we had managed our SOEs well, properly, we wouldn't be where we are needing an e-levy. So that's the hook. And we've had the sector minister, Joseph Kujo, say that he is a fan of fat salaries. In other words, proper remuneration, good remuneration for these SOEs, their executives and others. We've also taken a look at some of these executives and the benefits they get, even for accommodation. The perks are myriad. I want your take on that situation, especially considering that as we talk about them and as we talk about public services, we have CLOCSAG and the TUC also, engaging on these self-same matters about their conditions of service. How do you react to this bid? Our SOEs, many of them underperforming, and the sector minister saying, well, I'm an advocate for fat salaries, among other things.
Morning once again, a pleasure to be here. I think the first principle to state here is that remuneration must be linked to performance, right? And in that respect, if I'm paying you, for example, 10,000 Ghana cedis to run an operation, then I would expect that at the end of every month or quarter or every year, there will be some demonstrable improvement in terms of certain core metrics or indicators that is associated with the firm or the service that you're providing to me. So that, I think, really ought to be the core or the cardinal point that we then pivot all our analysis around to get a better appreciation of the context. So coming back to the SOE, then the question then becomes, if we're paying the CEOs, the executive directors, you name it, all these very good perks, which on average, the other workers within the public service are not getting, then you would have expected a commensurate, improvement in the business profitability indicators of these various SOEs. But when you look at the 2020 SOE report, and indeed any of the other SOE reports from the previous years, it makes a solid or so reading. And that reflects the fact that we are paying people and we're not seeing the improvement or the performance that should be commensurate with that payment structure. So I don't have any issue per se with paying people what the market rate ought to be. And let it also not be misconstrued that we should pay the CEOs of these SOEs a lower amount. No, I think we should pay them fairly, but we need to demand an improvement in the running of these organizations. And if we're not seeing those improvements in the bottom line financial indicators or operational indicators of these SOEs, then we have to find a way of, sacking them, or in some instances, privatizing a number of them as well. The last point I would add to this initial submission is also the fact that despite the CEOs being paid whatever salaries amount, remember that we are in a political environment that there's also often a lot of obstacles sometimes that are placed in their way. So the politics and even the appointment of the board members of some of these SOEs often means that sometimes there's conflict. And so the organization then is not being run optimally in a way that then ensures that value is being created. So it's a number of things. But the remuneration, personally, I think we should pay people properly, and then we demand performance and or accountability from them.
And how do you feel? I mean, you've spoken about privatization as well. There are many people, the likes of economist PNM as well, who has said that, look, when it comes to managing them, we've not done a good job. I mean, for so many decades. And so if the time has come for us to let go of some of them, we should do so, apart from the critical ones. What is your quick take on that?
I fully support that. I have been calling for some of the companies, the SOEs, to perhaps be offloaded. We've been on this journey before as a country, going back to the structural adjustment program of the 80s and the 90s. And we have not really done a great job in terms of this whole privatization, agenda. I think, for one, that there are far too many of these, state-owned enterprises. And the government doesn't necessarily have to run all of them. In other jurisdictions, what you actually have seen happen is you have like a holding enterprise, a holding entity that just has equity stakes in these, investments. And they then allow the private sector and or people who have the wherewithal, the competence, and the expertise to then run these enterprises and ultimately generate a profit and a return and pay dividends to the state. Because after all, what we want is to create enough value, create enough jobs to be able to deal with the problems that we're facing as a country. And in that regard, I think that some of them, after going through a rigorous analysis, you'll find that a number of these SOEs, in my view, are not worth keeping on the books of the government.
Right.
And even if we wanted to do that, let's have relative stakes in them in another investment vehicle, like a ring-fence vehicle.
Right.
That then means that the day-to-day operational running of the SOE is sort of ring-fenced in a way from the political pressures of the day. Okay. That, I think, would be a way to go. But definitely there are quite a number of them that we'll have to perhaps think about privatizing.
Okay. Dr. Champo, hold for me. I'll come back to you when we start dealing with the substantive issues of the e-levy. But just to cap off this end of the conversation in terms of the latest concerning our SOEs, we're also joined by Professor Ransford Jampo on the phone lines. Professor Jampo, a very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
It's a pleasure having you. I've been reading something you've put out there very recently, and I would like to take your thoughts on it. But before I read some of what you've put together, it's on the back of what Professor Stephen Adey, former head of the NDPC, as well as the GRA, has been saying. And in respect of the clock sack strike, and that dovetails into the performance of our public sector as well, he has said, if I were in government, on the back of the neutrality allowance and all of that, I would lock up the public servants, sack them, and bring in the military. And you have taken issue with that. In fact, you have asked in your latest piece, should elderly statesmen in democratic regimes be saying these when Jerry Rawlings, the man who boldly said he wasn't a fan of multi-party democracy, once threatened to kick out striking university lecturers from their bungalows and storm the lecture halls with soldiers, these elderly people took up issue with him. And there's something you say that I just want to quote from here. We must, however, not think about sacking bureaucrats and replacing them with soldiers simply because they made a demand which some subjectively think is nonsensical. And you talk about rationality. But why exactly do you have a problem with what Professor Stephen Adey said? Break it down for us.
Well, you see, I teach a course called Governance and Leadership. And one of the introductory parts of that course is to discuss the actors in the governance process.
Right.
And apart from the executive, the legislature, the judiciary, the media, civil society, the military, etc., we also talk about eminent people also as being part of the actors within the governance process of any country.
Right.
And the role of eminent people in the governance process is for them, those who have seen it all. Eminent people, you are talking about people who have served the nation in several capacities, have served regimes, they have retired, and they are people with a lot of experience. They are people who do not need any political appointment. They are people who have already made it in life. These people are supposed to be neutral, they are supposed to be objective, they are supposed to be fair-minded, and they are supposed to make fair assessment of situations and then offer advice.
It's interesting, just if I may just interject, you say they are supposed to be neutral. Interestingly, we're talking about neutrality allowance and all of that. But do you suggest the good old professor is not being neutral when he says what he did?
Well, so you let me develop the point. So the point is that I was quite taken aback when such an eminent Ghanaian who must rather be offering counsel to all of us politically and in all other spheres of life, decided to go on that tangent. Remember, we were all in Ghana when at one point in time, Jerry Rawlings threatened striking lecturers. Now, if you guys don't go back to the class, we'll kick you out of your bungalows and replace you with soldiers. The likes, people like Professor Adey were not happy with that comment emanating from Jerry Rawlings. And so when I heard him saying that those demanding neutrality allowance should be kicked out and replaced with soldiers, I asked myself, what has changed? Must we see? We always try to demystify the conduct of politics or the game of politics in our lecture halls when we are teaching level 100 students, because they have this kind of mindset that politics is a game of lies, deceit, and it's always dirty. Such tendencies that do not uphold principles would always make people have that derogatory conception and perception about politics.
Right.
What has changed? Yesterday, it was wrong when somebody says, I'm going to kick public servants out and replace them with soldiers. Right. Now, today, it is right. And what the same person who took issues with that thing yesterday is now sounding like that. But you see, it is worrying. Let me tell you, people do not know. Neutrality. I am a student of Max Weber. Max Weber was the first scholar who propounded the ideal type of the bureaucracy. And he had a lot of features for them. Two of them are important. The feature of anonymity and the feature of neutrality. Anonymity as a feature simply says that the public servants should work very hard, but they should not take any praise and they should not take any blame for whatever decision they take. And so they work very hard. When it goes on well, they are not praised. When it doesn't go on well, they are not blamed. The other bit is neutrality. Neutrality simply says that bureaucrats must not be, please pay attention to this very well, because I've seen so many people who are ignorant about the concept of neutrality trying to throw that into the air. When Max Weber argued that bureaucrats ought to be neutral, he never said that bureaucrats shouldn't vote. The principle or concept of neutrality as espoused by Max Weber simply says that no bureaucrat should be seen to publicly identify with any political party. That is to say, you are not, as a bureaucrat, expected to be seen adorning yourself with party paraphernalia. You are not to be seen wearing party T-shirts. You are not to be seen at party rallies. You are not to be seen openly campaigning for any political party. But when it's time for vote, you have to go and vote secretly. So I've heard people ignorantly say that if you vote, then you can't be neutral. Who told you that if you are neutral, you cannot vote? Aristotle said, man is by nature a political animal. And so being neutral does not deprive anybody the right to exercise choice when it matters. And the Max Weber himself, who propounded this theory, never said that bureaucrats should not vote.
Right.
Now,
so tell me.
Please, let me finish. Please, let me finish. Let me say this. So the idea of neutrality is supposed to ensure that these bureaucrats will be able to serve all regimes. So party A will come, they will serve you. Party B will come, they will serve you. Party C will come, they will serve you. In the process of this long service, they gain experience. That gives them the opportunity to be able to offer wise counsel to all appointees who go head those bureaucrats. That's why you don't need any competence or expertise to go head a ministry as a minister. People are appointed as ministers of defense. They are not soldiers. People are appointed as ministers for health. They may not be medical officers. But because these bureaucrats have served in all regimes and have not demonstrated preference for regime A or regime B, they have garnered enough experience and they offer the lap upon which the ministers will sit. Now they are saying that because they have been neutral, they have been impoverished. Those who have not been neutral have always had ATM machines on their verandas because of political appointments.
Okay.
And so they are saying that if I am neutral and then I'm being impoverished, but my neutrality helps me in constituting effective administrative machinery of the state and helping the state to develop, and you have decided not to be neutral, and that always gives you money, then pay me something to compensate for my neutrality.
So your thoughts?
You see, you may disagree with this. You may disagree with this. And like I said, if you read Max Weber, you say, this shouldn't be a way to go. You may disagree with this. But we must be rational and logical and fair in our analysis of this situation. The way to go, if you disagree, is not to say that they should be kicked out and be replaced by soldiers. Professor Day, we know him. When he was a neutral academic, he knows his salary that he took. And when he decided not to be neutral and he joined partisan politics, we know the number of votes he served on and how that translated tangibly into resources that were given to him by way of certain allowances and all that. We know all these things. So why do you change standards or shift goalposts simply because today things are different? I think our politics will continue to be seen as dirty and a game of lies so long as eminent people do not uphold principles in their public utterances when it comes to discussing in matters of politics.
Okay, so it appears we've lost Professor Jampo there. But interesting points he's been making, and at least we get the gist of it. He is very unhappy with some of the comments emanating from Professor Stephen Ade on this bit. But we continue from where he left off. At least we've engaged him. Dr. Champong, thank you for staying with us. So even as we get into the e-levy Any quick reaction to what Professor Jampo has said? Any quick reaction? If not, then we just go into the e-levy and what we are looking at on May the 1st.
I've been following the discussion, and I think perhaps it was a bit of an unfortunate comment that was made by the eminent man. I mean, the whole idea of going.
You mean Professor Ade?
Yes, going to bring military people in there and all of that. I couldn't fathom that. But that's probably as much as I can say on this.
All right. So let's get into the e-levy proper. And there's been a lot of talk. I mean, I'm sure you followed what Sam George has been saying as well, talking about the bottlenecks that we are going to be facing if we roll out the implementation on May the 1st. In fact, he has thrown a challenge that it cannot be rolled out on May the 1st as it has been planned unless it is phased out. And we've seen a document supposedly emanating from the GRA which says that, in fact, they are now contemplating operating on phase 1, whatever that means, when it comes to the implementation of the e-levy. But from where you sit, what do you see, the mechanisms in place? Are we ready for the implementation of the e-levy?
I managed to speak to some people within the telco space and people that are sort of better acquainted on the operational or system side of things. And in my interactions with them, what was quite clear is the fact that we're not fully ready to sort of implement or roll out the system. And if anything, perhaps it would be done kind of in a stepwise or perhaps in a phased manner. But regardless, on or come the 1st of May, we would have the e-levy being implemented one way and or another. There would be teething problems, there would be operational challenges, there would be issues that would have to be resolved as it's being rolled out. And that then all means that the first few weeks of implementation perhaps would be a little bit chaotic, but eventually it would be resolved in that manner. But speaking to people within the telco space, people who, like I said, are better acquainted on the operational side of things, what is quite clear is that the systems are not exactly fully ready as yet.
And when you say they're not fully ready, what is your leg on? I mean, what would you have expected to see as of this time that we are not seeing?
I mean, look, when the announcement was made and all the back and forth, I mean, you need to put a whole infrastructure around this. You need to design software, coding, ensure that they talk to each other. When I send, let's say 500 CDs, the system should be able to identify, have you done the cumulative amount of that 100 CDs? Are you a merchant or not? All those sort of things do take time for one to test them, to deploy them, and then further to ensure that it actually works at scale. And when I spoke to those who work within this space, what was quite clear is that some steps have been taken, the systems have been tested, but in terms of the mass deployment or mass rollout, they're not too sure as yet. So that's as much as I know. But I mean, regardless, with any big policy intervention or move like this, normally in the first few weeks, sometimes even months, you have problems. And those problems would eventually, I believe, be resolved in that regard. But some have also then called, well, what's the rush in all of this? Perhaps the government should slow down a bit and make sure that everything is fully identified and all the teething technical or technological issues are resolved before rollout. But I think from the side of government, the point really also is that the revenues are badly needed. So let's roll it out and then we'll resolve any technical issues as and when they come. That is the sort of impression that I get reading the situation.
But let me also bring in Dr. John Kumah, Deputy Finance Minister, who is on the line with us, joining the conversation. Dr. Kumah, always a pleasure having you. Good morning, sir.
Yes, good morning. It's always a pleasure to be with you. And good morning to Dr. Tio Champong.
Just to find out from you, how ready are we for the implementation of the e-levy in some 48 hours? If you looked at it, holistically, the entirety of it, on a scale of 1 to 100, how ready would we be for implementation?
We are 95% ready. So the 48 hours should make it 100%.
So we are 95% ready, and the next 48 hours will be 100% ready.
Yes, we are rolling out, God willing, May 1st. The e-levy is coming on live. It is also not true. Let me try to respond to the propaganda out there that e-levy is going to tax churches and mosques for their tithe and offerings. That's a complete lie and falsehood, and I encourage people to disregard that claim. There's no truth in that statement. E-levy does not affect churches, their offerings and tithes or zakat or things like that. So let me put that in perspective.
Dr. Kuma, just to clarify, so, and I listened to that conversation as Sam George and others had them. He specifies that, especially on the back of COVID, some people may not go to church, but they pay their tithes, they pay their offering via Momo. You're aware of that, right? And that is what he was referencing, that if these churches, they may have to use merchant numbers, or if they are not, then it means that if I decide to send, let's say, 200 CDs as offering or tithe, and I am using Momo, 1.5 will hit me, right? But that's supposed to be offering. If I were giving it in church, there would be no 1.5 on it. So that is the context in which some of this is. How is that going to be managed?
Yes, that's the context I completely disagree. First of all, assuming you issued a check for your tithe of, say, 2,000 Ghana cedis, your bank is still going to charge you for your bank charges services for issuing a check. Does it mean that you are being charged for your tithe? Or assuming that I picked my car, bought fuel, and drove to the bank and withdrew 2,000 cedis to go and pay my tithe, the transportation to the bank to do the withdrawal and transportation to the church, is it part of the tithe I'm paying? So this is a complete propaganda just to create unnecessary fear in people. If you decide to pay your tithe of 2,000 Ghana cedis, exactly 2,000 Ghana cedis will go to the church or to the mosque, and it will not be taxed. E-levy is not designed to tax church.
How will the system detect that this money that I am sending to my church is for this, and so it will not be taxed? Because it's going to be a Momo transaction still.
Yes, there's a difference between being charged for using Momo and telling us that we are charging your tithe or we are taxing your offering. There are two different things. I don't know if you get the picture I'm painting. The argument is that if I send my tithe by Momo, I may be taxed 1.5% after 100 Ghana cedis as a service charge. But that is not going to affect the amount of tithe I'm going to pay to my church. And it is the same way if I had written a check. My tithe will still be paid, but my bank will still charge me for the services of issuing the check. It's the same way if I had gone through a car to do the fiscal withdrawal, I was still going to pay my T&T before I did the withdrawal to go and pay in check. So let's not confuse these things to say that e-levy is coming to charge tithe and church offerings. This is a big lie. It's a complete falsehood, and I don't want anybody to give attention to that claim. Now, on the issue of
something to what Honorable is saying,
yes,
just for the purposes of public education.
Okay.
The point
Dr.
really
Champong, are you speaking there? Because I can barely hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me?
It's still very low. Okay, but you go ahead.
Yeah, just to add something to what Honorable was saying on this for the public education purposes, that I think the good thing here with this, with the churches actually, is that it will force them to register as merchants. And if they are registered as a merchant, then that means that when you send that transfer to them on a merchant basis, you don't pay any of the 1.5% transfer on that. And from a tax point of view, at least it allows the GRA and even the ministry to see, how many of these entities actually sit or are registered in that regard. Because remember that the churches are basically non-tax exempt entities in that regard. So Honorable is very right in the sense that when you are sending that money, you will still send your 100 CDs or 200 CDs or whatever, and then you pay the service charge on it. But that is the separate from the amount that you're sending, unless, of course, you're saying that 100 CDs that you are sending, now you deduct the 1.5% from it and maybe send a lower amount, which then is a different argument altogether. But I just thought I'd throw in that just to clarify the point.
Okay, Dr. Kuma, just quickly on this, going back to the issue about levying, people wrongly. Sam George has said quite a number of things, but tying that to what he says, and I just want to quote him here, what he specifically says for your reaction. He says, everybody is telling them, that is you, government, and the rollout, that your systems are not ready. You haven't done your user acceptability test, compatibility test, stress analysis test, so slow down, but you don't want to listen to sound advice. He says you are running this thing without consulting Parliament or the Communications Committee, and that he knows that technical people in the industry who are supposed to be part of the implementation are raising issues and that they are not getting the responses they want. How true is this?
Well, what I can say is that from March, that since the approval from Parliament was given, GRA and Ministry of Finance have been meeting all stakeholders, including the telcos, the banks, the EMIs, and everybody connected to the implementation of the e-levy. Obviously, in 1 month, the telcos have expressed reservation that technically and engineering-wise, it will be very difficult for them to plug in onto their common platform within 1 month. However, they have shown serious commitment, and let me use this opportunity to thank the telcos and all the stakeholders for their tremendous support so far. And what has been concluded is that we will extend their continuous work to join the common platform up to end of July. But whilst we are taking off in May, they can still continue to charge e-levy on their individual separate platforms because they already operate individually, except that they may not be on the common platform that GRA has created for the collection of the e-levy. And they have an extended time up to July to be able to do that. That notwithstanding, from 1st May, every network on any transactions that they do, they are going to charge the 1.5% after 100 Ghana cedis transaction on any Momo transaction that occurs on their network. So it is just maybe the mode of collection, instead of happening on the common platform, going to happen on the individual networks until we are able to.
We seem to have a bit of a challenge with the connection to Dr. John Kuma. We'll try to rectify that so we can have him back and he can conclude on some of these thoughts. But just continuing with some of what Sam George alleges, he says the GRA has admitted that all transactions done when the system is in place will attract a 1.5% levy, since crucial analysis that authorizes it to operate has not been carried out yet. Suggesting then that regardless of whether you fall into the bracket or not, whether you are sending 50 CDs or whether you are paying to your church, you're going to feel the brunt of the e-levy until certain measures are put in place. Dr. Kuma, you are making a point.
Yes. So the point I was making is that all these concerns are being addressed. Some of them will be very difficult. For instance, when the exemption says that if you do up to 100 Ghana cedis a day,
Okay, we're still having challenges with the connection for Dr. John Kuma. If this persists, maybe we'll just reach him via the phone lines and so we can have a proper conversation on this. But let me come to you, Dr. Echampo. So listening to what the Deputy Finance Minister is saying, he is saying that as it is now, we're at 95% readiness when it comes to rolling out the e-levy, and that in these next 48 hours before the 1st of May, we'll be 100% ready. But that is not exactly what we've heard from some of the telcos, and now Sam George, who says, and to quote him, "I am extremely confident that the Ghana Revenue Authority cannot implement the obnoxious e-levy in the format they have advertised on the 1st of May 2022. It is simply impracticable and untenable at this time. They either postpone start date or revert to phase 1 implementation as earlier advised." Tie that into the fact that the GRA, per something that has been put out there, from dated yesterday, says they are actually facing some constraints and that they will start rolling out with a phase 1. When you put all of that together, does it give you the confidence that we are fully ready to roll this out?
Yeah, that it will be rolled out. Listening very carefully to the GRA statement, to what Honorable Sam George had said, and then just from Honorable John Kuma as well, what is quite clear to me is that something has been done in terms of systems work, in terms of trying to integrate platforms. The challenge remains that some of the telcos have not fully joined to the platform that GRA is building for collecting the e-levy. So what that then means is that in the interim, the amount will still be charged using the existing platform that the telcos already have. And then in the back end, on the back channel, there will be some sort of settlement taking place that then allows the money subsequently to be transferred to the GRA's, account. So, I mean, from a technology point of view, it does indicate to me that something has been done, and at least on the 1st of May, the e-levy will be rolled out one way or the other. What is not too clear at the moment now, or listening to the deputy minister's statement, is that some of the telcos and that system, or the systems they are operating, is not fully plugged into the new one that the GRA is building and or has built, and that then would take some months. Certainly the minister indicates that we're looking up to kind of like July for that to be done. But that does not mean that the void or the gap that has been created means they cannot collect the e-levy. They can do that using the platform that the telcos already have. The challenge with that then means is that you would have some sort of ad hoc issues or implementation issues where, for example, you may not be able to fully tell who is exempt, who is not, and there would be some backlog.
And that's a major problem that comes up, Dr. Theo Echampo, because as has been intimated by the Member of Parliament for Ningo Pram Pram, he says that at the rollout, if things remain the way they are, there'll be no discrimination. If you send 20 CDs, 50 CDs, and even not beyond the 100 CDs, it will hit you until certain remedial measures are put in place, so that then maybe people will have reversals of their sums of money. But that will be an inconvenience to everybody. That is what he suggests.
Yeah, that's the trade-off that has to be made in here. And the trade-off here then is the government prepared to delay this for a few days or weeks to resolve these teething issues, or they are prepared to roll this out and then find a way of resolving some of these challenges, potentially with exemptions and double payments, you name it, as and when you run the process of the system. But it's very clear, and it's a problem that would have to be resolved one way or the other. I did intimate that the challenge is that the government needs revenue. So one way or the other, I think they're going to roll out the platform or the system and then find a way of dealing with these challenges as and when they come up.
Thank you, Doc. Let me find out from Dr. Kuma whether they are willing to do exactly as you say. So, Dr. Kuma, welcome back. Thank you for joining us via the phone lines now.
Thank you.
Right. If you could just speak up a bit for me, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, I will.
Right. So we're talking about your readiness, and you say you are 95% ready. Within the next 48 hours, we'll be 100% ready. Yes. We've spoken about the levy, the 1.5%. And just to clarify, Sam George says that you are not ready to across the board, be able to detect that Asamesi is sending 50 cedis, and so it shouldn't be hit, or Asamesi is sending to church, and so it shouldn't be hit until that church gets a merchant number. Can you clarify for me that as of the 1st of May, when it rolls out, the system will be able to identify those who must, fall under the 1.5% levy category and those who will not? I just want that confirmation.
Okay. There are two answers to that position that Sam George has espoused. One, we are ready. The system will identify anybody who does transactions on his phone or on his telco line up to 100 Ghana cedis. And it doesn't matter the tranches you did, it 20 cedis, 30 cedis, up to 100 Ghana cedis. The system will see it and it will exempt you, just like the networks or the telcos are already operating. The only issue is where an individual, let's call him Sam George, decides to use 2 or 3 of his registered SIM to do a transaction up to 100 Ghana cedis a day. This is where, because we don't have the full integration and the interoperability, the system will not be able to know that the 30 cedis that was initially done was from Sam George, and the other 52 on the Tigo line was from Sam George, and the next 20 cedis was from Sam George. So the cumulative effect of that 100 cedis exemption could not apply because you are doing it on different networks. This is where the full integration will happen in July, and we are going to resolve that problem.
So, hold it for me, Dr. Kumar. So until that full integration happens in July, when Sam George or whoever sends that sum of money, the system will not be able to identify that it is the same Sam George sending from MTN, Vodafone, yes, Airtel, Tigo lines, and so there will be a charge?
Will he? What was the question?
So I'm asking, like you're saying, so until that full integration in July, if Asamesi sends, one person sends from different lines, let's say 3 different telcos, what would happen cumulatively if it amounts to 100 cedis? Will the person be charged?
Yes. Once the system is not able to identify that you are the same person on the 3 different networks, that's one charge. So you are advised to use one network to hit the cumulative level. But it's also something that will go against the GRA as well, because it means that we are not able to, in fact, it's even GRA going to lose more than the person who is doing these transactions on 3 different lines. Because if you did 100 cedis with your MTN and you go and use your Tigo to do another 100 Ghana cedis, the system for now will not be able to track you until we are able to do the full integration and the ID system is replaced with a Ghana card. So these are genuine concerns or lapses that will even affect government more than any individual who is going through that process. So for us, we are ready with the system. If you do it on your network, there's no problem. This challenge will not arise if you are using the same network. And these are initial hitches, which, of course, we are ready to go through until the July when we have the full integration.
So you say these are initial hitches, but this is technology here. So if you have these hitches, why not just wait? And especially when we've had that statement from the GRA dated only yesterday. They are saying that, and they are referencing their 4th April letter, which said they were going to roll out. And this is just briefly what the GRA says. Following the Ghana Revenue Authority's assessment of the general readiness of some charging entities to integrate with the e-levy management system, the Commissioner General has decided on a modified phased approach for the implementation of the e-levy from 1st of May 2022. The guidelines for the modified phased approach are attached. It means that even from the standpoint of the GRA, they realize there are problems which is why they are doing what Sam George suggested. They're not going to have the full rollout. It's going to be a phased approach.
There won't be a perfect system, my brother. You cannot deny a good because you could have gotten a better or best results. But if you could get a good result, why do you wait? Because you are waiting for a better or a best result. We can't do that. Obviously, if you look at the scenarios that we are talking about, it has got a minimal impact on what government is trying to achieve. So we believe, that's why I'm saying that we are 95%. We believe that so far, with all the engagements we have done and all the testings that we have done, we are in a good position to start with what we have. And as we move on, some of these challenges, which is to do with every system that anybody will begin, you have to go through a certain process of firm assurance to be able to overcome some of these challenges. But we have looked at these concerns that have been raised vis-a-vis the bigger picture of what government wants to do and what the telcos and all the stakeholders can do at this time. And we believe that nothing can stop us on the May 1st to roll out. So we'll roll out and then we'll work together to resolve some of these challenges that will come.
We've heard from the Economic Fighters League on this rollout of the e-levy. We also know that there is a move to injunct the process due for the 4th of May. Even the legal elements don't affect it, and you're going to go ahead?
Well, we have not received any court order as a government.
But there's a motion that has been filed by...
Yeah, but the motion is not a court order. If you file an application, you are either going to be refused or granted. So that is not a court order.
Yes, but my point is, it's on the 4th of May that the decision will be made. So why not wait for that day?
Oh, no. I mean, please, you should know that we are already behind schedule for about 3 months already. And as long as there's no legal obstacles at the moment, we want to carry on until a court order tells us not to, or another legal process tells us to halt. For now, if we want to give excuses why we shouldn't start, I believe we can get 1,001. But I can tell you that we have firmly made up our mind. Government is rolling out the e-levy on May 1st, and we are encouraging citizens to accept that this country will be built by us alone. We may receive external support, but it can never replace what we can do for ourselves as citizens of Ghana. Let us all accept our role in this e-levy project and look at how we can contribute to make the processes better and achieve a better development for our country.
Okay. Dr. Kumar, just to wrap the conversation from your end, I just want to clarify 2 major things, and then I'll go back to Dr. Theo Champo. So I've heard you speak a bit about Sam George when he talks about Express Pay being asked to build a cloud-based system that is supposedly going to cost us $40 million for the rollout of the e-levy. Is that true or not?
That's a complete falsehood. There's no iota of truth in that. Complete falsehood.
Is Express Pay playing any role whatsoever as far as the e-levy is concerned?
Well, not as far as I know. And there's no contract or anything to that effect.
Okay. So just to clarify one more time before you take leave of us. So it is safe to assume at this point in time that by May 1, government will be 100% ready for the implementation of the e-levy, GRA and the telcos and others. Again, that the e-levy will not affect zakat or tithes. Again, that the system for implementation will have the ability to identify exempted transfers, apart from the scenario you gave me, where if you're sending from 3 different numbers, it may assume that it is you and cumulatively, take off the e-levy.
Yeah. Let me give you an example. If you transfer money from your wallet on a verified account on your phone to your bank account, the system will see that it's the same person. It will not charge you. If you move money from your bank account into your wallet on your phone, it's a verified account. The system knows it's you and it will not charge you. So all the exemptions have been taken care of, except the scenario I told you about, which will be corrected very soon.
Dr. Kuma, always refreshing catching up with you.
Thank you very
immensely
much.
grateful
Thank
for your
you.
time. Thank you,
Bye.
sir. All right. And that is Dr. John Kuma, Deputy Finance Minister. Dr. Theo Champon, listening to all the assurances given us by Dr. John Kuma, what is your takeaway? Are we there? Are we there? And he talks about the fact that for some of these situations or scenarios, we may have to get to full integration in July. Like what he mentions, you have different networks, 3 of them. You're transacting on all of them. For now, the system will see that it is you, and cumulatively, it will take off 1.5% until maybe sometime in July where it will be able to distinguish. What's your reaction?
So we're not fully there, but it will be rolled out regardless, and those issues would be resolved within the weeks to come. Certainly, I think by the July deadline, that's possible for full systems integration. But the biggest trade-off or imperative here is the need to collect or generate revenues for running the state machinery in that regard. So I think what is very clear is that that trade-off decision has been made, and the sort of the attempt with the good is not stopping us or stopping the policymakers from going ahead and implementing the e-levy in the current format. I mean, those issues I'm pretty sure would be resolved in the months and in the weeks to come.
What will be your expectations as it rolls out on May the 1st?
I think one of the key things also here is that we need a lot of public education to disabuse the minds of consumers on, some of the negative things that are going around within the media space, and to assure people really that 2 things: the monies that are being collected will be used for the purposes that has been said would be utilized for. That's very, very important in terms of transparency and accountability. And that ultimately ensures that people have confidence in using these Momo services, and that financial inclusion and intermediation doesn't suffer just because of the introduction of this policy. So definitely, I think with the rollout, if there's any suggestion I have to the policymakers, particularly GRA and Ministry of Finance, is the fact that we need a lot more public education and assure citizens that, one, they can still feel safe and use the system, but importantly, there is an accountability mechanism to ensure that those monies would be used for the purposes that they are. And then number 2, if you have any issues whatsoever with the transfer, so for example, double deductions, things like that, there are channels to resolve that for you subsequently. And I think that would go in a long way to ensure or inure consumer confidence.
Okay, Dr. Theo Champon, it's been very interesting hearing your take on this, and we're all excited looking at May the 1st and seeing whether it will roll out first of all and how the rollout will be. We'll be definitely interacting with a lot of Ghanaians to find out how they feel. But thank you so much for joining the conversation, Dr. Theo Champon.
Pleasure is mine. Good morning.
Great. We'd also like to say a very big thank you to Dr. John Kuma, Deputy Finance Minister, who joined us a short while earlier. And on the brief SOE conversation, Professor Ransford Jampo, who also joined us. Stay with us. We'll take a break. But when we return, even as we add our second conversation, we'd like to hear from you. It's happening on May the 1st, per what we've been told. The e-levy is coming. How prepared are you for the e-levy? And how are you going to manage yourself to cope with the e-levy? What's going to be your coping strategy? Do let us know when we return. I'll be hearing from all of you as well. Do stay.